was convenient. Susan, I was instructed to sit down with Susan, and we went over this and addressed the issues that had accumulated. So there are a number of changes, yes, but these were changes that were aggregated over time.
Given the fact that it's 10 o'clock and it's winter anyway, my recommendation would be that we postpone it because I have a lot of discussion. This could go on for a while. And maybe we could talk about this in the next meeting. Would that be all right?
Well, I still like to hear, and no one said the back,
Oh,
other than,
Yeah, I would like to do background
Okay,
as well.
sorry.
Sure, that's okay, backgrounds,
Yeah, sorry about that.
Well, part of it, you want to go on, Councilor?
No, I'll defer to you first.
Part of the problem is there's some things at the park that the police could not act on. I.e., if people weren't parking in the right spot, in a parking spot, if they parked on the lawns or that, there was nothing in our ordinance that allowed them to do anything with those cars. Besides asking the people to move them, okay?
did they move?
Sometimes they did and sometimes they didn't, okay? All we're trying to do here is put out the issues that have caused some problems over the years. We've not allowed skateboarders out there for years, and they show up and they'll skateboard down that hill. It's not safe, down the road. So I don't know where all the issues are, because most of this we've tried to do the proper rules before, as to the hours of operation. We don't do anything with the sled hill. We're just trying to get compliance out there. And before, because it was in the park rules and not an ordinance, they couldn't do anything. Okay? So there's not a major change going on in here. It's just trying to get something so you can do the issues with the people, If they decide to park, last year we had 3 incidences where we had people renting a shelter for 80 people and they showed up with 300. Okay? Nowhere to put them, and we had baseball games going. So they were parked on every piece of lawn out there, and police would show up, and they would do their best in asking people to move their vehicles, but it becomes a hazard after a time. So we were told we had to put it in an ordinance, and that's what we're trying to do here. I don't know where there's major changes in here to anything. I really don't. It's just trying to make the park work.
Well, the major changes, these would go to court, is that the way it would
Well,
work? There'd be a fine levied and the court would get some of the money? Is that what would happen?
Before we do anything out there, we'll always ask the people to move or change their habits, okay? The problem is some people don't want to move or change their habits, okay? And there was nothing we could do, okay? So this just gives us the ability to do a few things,
So,
okay?
so it does go to the court?
Some
Ticket is written?
There could be a ticket written on some of this, yes. Do we want to do that? No, but right now we don't have any way of getting around it just by the park rule, okay? And the park has become very popular out there. So, we've put in numerous changes in order to make the park work for everybody.
Go ahead, general questions about, go ahead.
Well, would you want to ask questions here, or do you want me to kind of go into the detail?
I just have one question here. We've got, how long will they have dogs, cats, or horses scratched out? Is there anybody? I thought dogs weren't allowed out there.
They're not allowed out there, but they got moved to the park rules.
Section 7.04.
Okay, I hadn't gone down that part.
All of these things, when you go to section number, the penalties, somebody could get $500 fine for taping up a sign that says "Happy Birthday, Grandma." So now you go on, and here's the real problem that I have with it. When you read this, and you read it along with the park rules, what it does is it vests police power in an individual or in individuals, because it says that if the supervisor's named individuals, say it's the park workers, determine that somebody is being a nuisance, right? Then that person can say, you have to leave the park. And if that person doesn't leave the park, the police come and write them a ticket, not for being a nuisance, but for refusing to leave the park, which means you're essentially denying that person due process, because some individual said I was being a nuisance. Now take this to the next level. What's a nuisance? Somebody may interpret that as You don't like the way that my ethnic food is being cooked. You don't like the smell of it. You're being a nuisance. You have to leave the park. You get this, you gotta read this whole thing, because when you start playing out scenarios, so my grandmother's gonna have a 90th birthday party, and we tape up a sign that says, "Happy birthday to you." That could be a $500 fine. One of her grandkids is carrying a skateboard, because possession of a skateboard could be a $500 fine. Okay, if she shows up early, according to the park rules, if her reservation's at 1, and the grandkids come out at 12:30, and they start setting up the decorations, the rules say you can lose your right to make future reservations, and that individual can order you out of the park. And if you don't go, the police, they come and write you a ticket. They don't write you a ticket for violating the rule. They write you a ticket for refusing to follow the orders of that person that has ordered you out of the park. Now, you take this to the next level, and it says that, and my wife, who, she's, she takes our kids to the park in the summer all the time, and the women meet at the shelter, and they have lunch, and they don't have a reservation, the shelter's not being used. She laughed out loud, she said, try and ban the women in the township from using the shelter because they don't have a reservation. So it says that, you gotta read this whole thing, and that's why I recommend postponing it, because it becomes so onerous, that, in addition to that, it says that, okay, if the shelter, the second thing is that there's language in there that says the designated employer, whatever it is, the park worker, may ask you to move, not shall. You may have to do this. So now it becomes arbitrary. We don't like this person's my friend, we'll let them stay in the shelter. So now, take that to the next level, and it says, these are open air shelters, and it says, if that shelter, for example, is determined to have a capacity of 50 people, if there's 55 in there, that's certainly not a fire hazard. It's open air. And it says, we can throw you out of the park for having 55 people in a shelter that is designated for 50. But the worst part is that if those shelters are not reserved, and a family wants to come there to have a picnic, and it's not reserved, it's a public asset, it's a public park, who cares? Why do we need these rules? They don't make any sense.
We have the rules because there's people that do rent these shelters and pay a lot of money to rent them.
Right.
Okay, and the board years ago designed that between a certain date and a certain date, that to use those shelters, there shall be a fee paid. We have had people show up and say, nobody's here right now, I'm using the shelter, and then an hour later, the people show up that rented it. And this happened this past summer, and they said, we have a rental, but at that time, the people, our workers happened to be over at Lake Point Soccer Park doing something, and the people that rented it ended up leaving and coming back later that day, very disappointed on what happened. So that's why we've put in our rules to rent these shelters during that time. Do we care if people go in there if they're not rented? No. Do we care if groups go in? Yes. Okay.
My wife and her friends go
And we've not kicked them out, but if they're going there for a party and they're expecting a number of people, it's rented. And that's what we've lived by for a number of years. Okay, we had 3 incidents this year where people thought they could just take it over because they lived in the township and nobody was in it at the time. These are very hard things to take care of during the year, especially on the weekends.
Well,
I don't see, here's